I was never bothered by Kathleen Folbigg being jailed 20 years ago for murdering 4 of her children in 4 separate occasions. The youngest was just 19 days old, the oldest 19 months. And Folbigg said they died of natural causes, a terrible tragedy. But now new evidence has come forward about those deaths that could maybe free her 5 years early. But should it? Retired Chief Justice Tom Bathurst, KC, has just finished a judicial inquiry into Folbigg's convictions that's considered new scientific evidence that some kind of rare gene mutation may have caused the deaths of Folbigg's daughters, 2 of the 4, Laura and Sarah. Here's a barrister.
Indeed, the most critical new evidence concerning the CALM2 G114R genetic variant was even beyond the contemplation of science when the trial was conducted in 2003.
I was joined a short while ago by Sky News reporter Danica Di Giorgio, who's been covering this case. Danica, great to see you again. What is the significance of this new evidence?
Well, it's highly significant because this really can only be described, Andrew, as a scientific breakthrough. So much so that the Department of Public Prosecutions has conceded that there is now reasonable doubt surrounding Kathleen Folbigg's convictions for killing her 4 children. To try and make you understand what this is a rare genetic mutation that's only been found recently as part of genetic sequencing. And basically it was found in Folbigg's 2 eldest daughters. It causes sudden infant death and it also causes heart conditions, and therefore it is highly likely that that is what the cause of death for these 2 girls was. Today we also heard from the DPP, and they've said that given that there is this new evidence, there's now a new understanding of the circumstances surrounding their deaths. Also, new evidence suggests that one of the boys, one of Folbigg's sons, he actually died from a neurological disorder. The cause of death for the other son is unknown. But it's highly significant, Andrew. We know that when somebody is convicted, it has to be beyond reasonable doubt. Well, now there's doubt. So certainly interesting times ahead with this case.
Well, I've got it on those 2 girls. There were also 2 dead boys. You said one neurological issues maybe, the other we don't know. How does Folbigg and her team explain the boy's death? Because this genetic mutation was not passed on to them.
No, it wasn't correct, but Folbigg has always maintained that these children died of natural causes. But as I said, it's this new evidence that's come to life where they believe Patrick, one of the sons, had a long-standing neurological disorder. They believe it could have possibly been epilepsy, and that was his cause of death. As for the other son, Callum, they're not sure yet. They simply don't know how he died, but they believe that why would a mother be responsible for the deaths of one child, if not all of them? So that was, I guess, the argument. They're saying, why would Kathleen Folbigg kill Callum when the others died of natural causes? So that's the argument that's been presented.
Then there's the evidence of Folbigg's diaries, which were very important in convicting her in the first place, where she talks about feeling guilty about these deaths, about being scared she'll hurt the other children, about her temper, etc. For instance, she wrote this, let me quote this, about one of the children who later died, one of the girls. She said, "I lost it with Laura a couple of times, must try to release my stress somehow. I'm starting to take it out on her. Bad move. Bad things and thoughts happen when that happens." Then later she said, "She's a fairly good-natured baby, thank goodness. It will save her from the fate of her siblings. I think she was warned." What did the barrister say about all those things?
Andrew, there's been a lot of contention, in particular in the last 2 days, over these diary entries because they simply don't read well. To give you a bit of context, back in the original hearing, back in 2003, there was no evidence of injury on these 4 children. So the Crown largely relied on these diary entries and they successfully proved that it was an admission of guilt. But in the last few days, the lawyers rather for Folbigg have been arguing that psychiatrists and psychologists have reviewed these diaries and they've said it cannot be read as an admission of guilt, simply because at the time Folbigg was suffering with a major depressive disorder and was also showing signs of maternal grief. Even today, Folbigg's lawyers likened this case to that of Lindy Chamberlain. This is what they said.
Remember the case of Lindy Chamberlain, who was widely and publicly condemned over her manifestations of grief, or rather her non-manifestations of grief, after her child had supposedly been taken by dingo, which of course turned out ultimately.
Look, maybe that's the explanation for it, but gee, the diary entries are damning. I mean, they're going into, you know, I wish the child would stop crying, or it better stop crying. I feel bad what happened before. I mustn't lose my temper again, etc., etc. But, you know, I don't know. What happens now?
Well, this is the interesting part. We are waiting to hear from the report from Tom Bathurst KC. He's been presiding over this inquiry. He needs to decide for himself whether he believes there is reasonable doubt. If the answer is yes, he can then take this to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal could quash the convictions altogether. There could be a retrial, or the Governor-General could pardon Kathleen Folbigg. Bear in mind, she's served 20 years of that 25-year prison sentence. We're also waiting to hear from the Attorney-General as to whether he will free Kathleen Folbigg from prison. There's no doubt whatever happens next is going to have significant consequences for the New South Wales judicial system. In the event, Andrew, that those convictions are quashed, it's guaranteed that the state will be liable for a huge compensation payout. But regardless, it's going to shake up the judicial system, but also because of the role of new science, the role of new genetic testing. And I guess what does that mean for other New South Wales cases?
Very good point. Danica DeGiorgio, thank you so much for your time.